Well, hello and welcome to Just a Thought, Sunshine Cathedral's Saturday talk program where the Reverend Cindy Lippert and I am Darrell Watkins, the senior minister of Sunshine Cathedral. We discuss just a thought, just one, supposedly. We start out with a thought and then we chase about 1,000 thoughts, but we do start out with just a thought. And today's thought comes from Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity movement, Unity Church and School. And Charles says, deny that lack has any place or reality in your thought or affairs, and affirm plenty. Praise what you have and insist that it is constantly growing larger. This may be our longest quote so far, so I'm going to say it again. Deny that lack has any place or reality in your thought or affairs, and affirm plenty. Praise what you have and insist that it is constantly growing larger. That's Charles Fillmore. Now, Cindy, you were a Unity student and teacher and leader and minister and all of those things. I think your name is somewhere on the campus there in Unity Village. So you're the Fillmorean expert. What's he telling us?
Well, first of all, I don't pretend to be a Fillmorean expert. You know, I'm divine science that got retreaded into Unity. They let me come and play because I held one of their churches hostage. So, you know, they decided to go ahead and ordain me. Anyway.
Wasn't it one of the Brooks sisters though that like have?
Yeah, I look pretty good for 92, don't I?
Yeah, not you. Wasn't it one of the Brooks sisters though that was like socialized with the Fillmores? She and her husband worked with Charles, and yeah, that was
well,
so related.
They had Melinda Kramer, who is our godmother of founder of Divine Science. They had her at Kansas City. I don't think the village would have been built yet, but they had her come and teach reportedly 350 some students. So they all were very friendly. People ask, what's the difference between divine science, religious science, unity, you know, all of the UFBL, all of them. And I always end up saying, I don't know about you, but I always end up saying, there is not one whit of difference to the untrained, over-scholared eye. Most of us that like to pick apart fine points of religious philosophy will tell you, but it'll take about 10 hours. So yeah. It's all about pretty much the same, but they were all friends and they all were on this.
Yeah, Annie Willits taught at the village, and these homes of truth.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, they were all together.
Emma Curtis Hopkins, Fillmore quoted Hopkins all the time in his materials, and you know, she was spiritual sisters with Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science. So
Norman Vincent Peale dedicated the chapel at Unity Village. So yeah, so meanwhile, you do know the Fillmores. Maybe you weren't in on the dinner parties, but you've studied them.
I was at a dinner party with Rosemary Fillmore Ray. So I think she was granddaughter.
Granddaughter, yes.
Yeah, granddaughter. So anyway, okay, so back to lack. You may recall 2 weeks ago we were talking about knowing that our house was sold, and we were in the midst of the pandemic, a curfew, looting, rioting, all kinds of murdering, all kinds of terrible things were going on in the world. And here the
But enough about the party you threw.
Enough about the party we threw. And we decided, wouldn't it be a grand time to sell a house? Yeah. So, and I'm talking to you on our Just a Thought, and we'd have to rewind and listen to what was said, but it was about doing more spiritual work, not more marketing of the house. We were told, number one, that our house was too cluttered. It would never sell unless we decluttered, and because the buyer is apparently not bright enough to figure out what they're seeing. And my husband and I said no. We were also told the price was listed too high. My husband and I said no. And I affirmed that the buyer had to be alive and well on planet Earth, and just to be able to buy a house. So we knew that that buyer was being magnetized to our property at that very moment. And you and I got off the broadcast, and Richard told me that we had a showing, and that was the woman. And I had affirmed that whoever bought it would walk in and say, "I love it. This is it." And the realtor told me later in the week, that very same day, by the way, was the buyer. And she walked in and said, "I love it, cancel the other two." And it was the first house she saw. So there you have it. Just because, yeah.
You also, in that and this is a thing you do, that when you want more, you give more. You
Yes.
did a tithe in the middle of all that.
Yes.
Which had a pretty quick turnaround. But that's something that you've taught and practiced over the years, that when you want more, you give more. And that seems to have pretty quick results for you.
And what I've always said is, don't give more than you're afraid to give. Don't attach your fear to that. I had a congregant years ago that said, "Cindy, I want to tithe, but every time I write the check, I'm afraid." And I said, "Then stop writing checks. Don't do it afraid." I'm not one of these that, it's like your attitude about what you're doing. If you're doing it because you think it's a magic check, don't do that. Give out of generosity what you have. If you don't have more than $10, give the $10. If you only have $1, give that. Give what you have that you can do without fear.
I knew a nun once that her, and I forget why, maybe it was a Lenten practice or maybe it was pledge drive time or something, but for some reason she made a promise to herself that whenever she was in Mass, she would never let the offering plate go by without putting something in it. And this is a nun, Val Poverty. I mean, how much money did she have? But she said, "I would never let the plate go by without putting something in it." And she said one day, all she had on her person was a dime. And here comes the plate. And she almost didn't do it because she was ashamed. She didn't want people to think, "Oh, look at that cheap nun throwing in a dime." But it was really 100% of what she had to give in that moment. And so, but she talked herself through it. She gave the dime. And she was talking about how sort of healed she felt of shame, and how glad she felt that she did give what she could, and just like what a wonderful blessing it was that she almost missed. She almost let shame keep her from keeping her promise. And she's like, even when it was difficult, even when I didn't have much, I kept my promise and I didn't let the plate go by. She gave a dime and felt so good about it afterwards. So yeah, there is some, and maybe it's because we live in a capitalist country, a capitalist culture, but somehow we are emotionally invested in money. We are tied to money, what money can buy. Families fight over stuff they can get when someone dies. People sue for a lot of money. People do the scratch offs with religious devotion, hoping to win some money. Money is important to us. And Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is." Well, our treasure in this culture is money. And so when we use our money to worship, when we use our money, we are investing ourselves really. And that's when we start seeing things change in us.
I believe in this country, there's a trinity. It's sex, power, and money. And when you have any of those two, it equals the third. And that's how people usually live their lives until they're trained otherwise in this great spiritual principle, that when you give, what you're doing is you're reminding yourself there's more where that came from. I got that from somewhere. I got that from some thought. Somebody hired me or somebody gave to me somehow. It was some kind of a trade. But when we think in terms of lack, when we tell ourselves we can't do a thing, then we can't do a thing. I once founded a church and everybody told me I couldn't do it. The great Leo Booth, whom I love, who's a great former Episcopal priest, I believe, and wonderful ministry of 12 steps and New Thought combined, told me, "Oh, Cindy, you can't build a church. It's too expensive." And I said, "But that we don't do it for that reason. We don't do it for that reason." And I did build a church, and I grew it to 70 people from nothing. And I turned it over to my mentee that I trained to do that, and he kept the church alive for another 6 years. So we can do what we're called to do, but if we tell ourselves we can't, then guess what? We can't.
Right. Ernest Holmes said there has never been a cosmic famine. I love that we live in an abundant universe, and so the trick is learning how to tap into that. And one of the ways that we tap into that, and I believe this is a Fillmoreism also, is that you participate in the circulation of divine supply. That's what giving is. It is participating in the circulation of divine supply. It's saying there's more where that came from. Now, that's in normal times. Okay, fine. Let me start giving to things I believe in. Let me give a little bit more. Let me give more time also. Let me give more compliments. Let me give more smiles. Let me give more energy. Just give. But then you find yourselves in a weird dystopian time where you're not supposed to leave the house very often. So that limits your volunteer opportunities. That limits some of the giving of your time or talent. Maybe you work for tips and your business has been closed down. So now you're waiting for the unemployment check to come in, and the savings are dwindling and the credit card is shooting up. In those extreme times, how does this philosophy apply when the world isn't normal?
Well, the world is always not normal. It's just that now it's landed on our doorstep. We typically are not living in a mud hut with no running water, but there are plenty of people who do every day and have for years. But now in the United States,
and live abundantly in those circumstances. We sometimes judge them based on what we think is important. There are people living joyfully and abundantly in conditions that we would judge insufficient.
Well, the people in India that live on the streets, and of course they'd like to have big palatial houses, but like Richard and I are looking for a house now, we're house hunting. And we realize, what little we need, that we've been spoiled over the years with opulent homes, which were wonderful. We were raising kids and had family come and visit. And now it's the reverse. Their families are large and it's just he and I. How much do we need? And what this shutdown has done for many is it's forced the human doings of the world to become human beings. And a lot of the counseling and coaching that I'm doing these days is more about stop trying to find purpose in your life and just nurture yourself. Do your meditation, do your yoga, journal your feelings, and ask yourself the question, who can I encourage today? When I'm down, that's usually when you'll get a call. How can I help you today? How's it going for you? I need to step beyond myself. The more I overthink a thing, the worse and the bigger it gets. It's like Little Shop of Horrors. Feed me.
Right.
All it knows is feed me. And those are your thoughts. Feed me. Tell me more. Tell me how awful this is.
My grandmother grew up, well, all my grandparents grew up during the Depression, and things were very tough, of course. And I remember my grandmother, no matter who stopped by, and people would, rural area back in the day, people would just stop by. Now we get annoyed if people just show up.
I know. Who's at the door?
Right? But she would often leave the front door open and just the screen door closed, so she could see who was coming, but every single person, she always had iced tea made. And every single person who ever crossed her threshold, the first thing she said, "Can I get you a glass of tea?" She had something to give, even though she grew up very poor. She was one of 10 children in the Depression. But she knew she had something to give. And every single human that ever walked across her door, "Can I get you something?" Can I get you a
Yes.
glass of tea? Or if we were sitting down to eat, she would say, will you stay for supper? Something to share, always something to share. Uh, there was we've traveled a lot in Latin America, and we were once at a place where uh, they had a national currency and then a currency for tourists, and the tourist currency was actually worth more. But the locals, they would give these this currency, and it wasn't really worth very much, but they just filled up the plate with it. They gave what they had, and people who didn't have money, they gave rice. They gave little bags of rice. They didn't have money, but they had rice. Somehow they had food, so they shared what they had. Um, and that just reminds me, you think you have nothing, but you might have a little bag of rice. You might have a glass of tea to share. And when we give what we can, I think that's maybe what Charles is talking about. That when you appreciate what you have, it seems like more. When you don't appreciate it, it doesn't seem like enough. When you do appreciate it, it seems like more. And then when you share it, it seems like more yet. And when you get into like the joy of it, then that even magnetizes more to you.
Well, remember the story of the woman that had the little bit of oil?
Yes.
Jesus said, do you have some? I just have this little bit of oil. Was it Jesus or no? That was before Jesus, right?
It was the prophet, the prophet in the Old Testament. But yeah, she said, "Oh, I was going to make one last meal for my kid and I to die, and but you can have one last meal with us, and we'll just all die together. Why not?" And
Yeah.
she invited him to dinner, her meager dinner, and he wound up staying with them, and they lived fine through the famine.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus' deal was although a prophet had done this in the Old Testament too, the loaves and fishes. We only have this much food. Well, just start spreading it out. We'll share as much as we can with as many as we can. And when they started doing that, it seemed to be enough. In fact, one version of the story says they had 12 baskets. They collected what was left over, and it was 12 baskets worth, which was enough for each one of them then. It's a parable of sharing, really. That when I start giving what I can, someone notices and they give what they can, and then before long, everyone giving what they can proved to be enough, even when in the beginning it seemed like we didn't have enough. How many times have one more person, it was a family reunion or something, and you had a lot of guests over, and someone brought their friend from college, where there was one more person, and you find the cot or the blow-up mattress or the big chair you make into kind of a bed for a small person, or you have more than you realize you have when you decide, I'm going to find a way to give this, to share this.
It's true. I'm also reminded, and I can't quote it, maybe you know the poem, Desiderata. There's a line in there, if you can call it up, do, but it's about giving a person hope before they hit that level of complete hopelessness. I have a good friend that I've mentioned before, Robin McQuitty, who is a walking miracle. And she lives in an apartment, and she loves to walk around, and she always chats up the homeless people. And she said, people don't understand. They think a homeless person is somebody who's wildly successful, and then one day they decide, oh, I'd rather lay down on the sidewalk and just sleep there. It isn't that. It's a lot of little tiny miscalculations. It's a lot of decisions that go haywire to the point that it becomes overwhelming to even begin to try to make corrections. And at that point, they're so exhausted emotionally and spiritually and physically that laying down on the sidewalk is the foregone conclusion. And when we can give hope, it keeps a person very often from just becoming overwhelmed and being willing to, to keep trying, to keep at it, just keep on keeping on.
There is Desiderata is a long poem, and actually Reverend Ann shared it earlier this week for midday prayer. But here is one section of it. I don't know if this is the part you're talking about. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism.
There you go. There you go. We ask, what is our purpose? Right now, in this ever-changing world, what is needed more than ever are people who are willing to provide hope where others can't see any. And it may be clear to you, but it may not be clear to another. To just help somebody say, look, I know this is rough. I've had a rough couple of weeks from just physical and mental exhaustion. When you move, especially at this stage in life, you're making so many decisions. You're deciding, okay, we don't need this anymore. Do we donate it? Do we sell it? Do we trash it? Do we send it to Darrell? What do we do? And you go to bed at night. You have no trouble sleeping, by the way. You just drop dead. You wake up
I
dead.
did get 30 boxes of books out of this deal.
Did you really? I called you up and said, would you like my library? Would you like it? And then I kept pulling. Well, I kept pulling books out. I said, oops, wait a minute, not that one. He'll have to wait till I'm dead.
Here's two more stanzas from that poem, which are about hope. I love this. First, my favorite stanza, and then the next one. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should.
That was first quoted to me. Somebody asked me, it was at Unity Village in the library, and he said, where are you from? And I said, oh, I've moved over 48 times in my life. I've quit counting. And he said, Cindy, you're a child of the universe.
Yep.
And I finally knew where I was from.
And I always, that's my favorite verse, but the next verse actually makes it applicable. So I'm loving that too now. So whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive God to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations and the noisy confusions of life, keep peace with your soul. Whatever the noisy confusions of life, keep peace with your soul. I love that. So let's go back to Charles, wrap it up the way we started. Deny that lack has any reality in your thought or affairs, and affirm plenty. Praise what you have, and insist that it is constantly growing larger.
Nothing and nobody stands in the way or interferes with my possessing all that is mine by divine birthright, not even me.
It's just a thought, but it's a pretty good one, maybe especially in this bizarre time. We don't understand everything. Not everything's easy, but maybe the universe is unfolding exactly as it should. Maybe we can go to peace instead of to pieces. And maybe not even all of this craziness can keep what is ours from getting to us. Nothing stands in our way, not even ourselves. I'll take it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. God bless you, everyone, and happy Independence Day.